Hi everyone, I am Meena Adnani, the founder of Strong and Shine, a brand that inspires and transforms the lives of thousands of women all around the world. Today, I am extremely privileged to have Eric Edmeades. And if you do not know Eric or have never heard about Eric, then I don't know where you have been. Eric is a serial entrepreneur. He is also the founder of WildFit. And if you don't know what WildFit is, go check it out. WildFit is the most transformational and innovative diet programs. I mean, I'm saying diet, but I think Eric would definitely say it's not. It has really rewired people's programming in the way people think about food. And again, like I said, if you don't know anything about WildFit, you've got to check it out. His website is gowildfit.com. So Eric, thank you so much for making time to have this conversation today. And the reason I invited you is not just because of how amazing you are and as a keynote speaker as well. I forgot to mention that, as a keynote speaker and as a fantastic example to show many people about how we can think, do, and have as human beings. And what really inspires me about you is, well, I can't choose one thing. I would have to say there are a lot of things. One is the level of humility with which you carry yourself. I am always blown away by that. And also the level of wisdom that you share, and whether people are attending your talks or whether people are attending your programs, there's so much wisdom and there is so much, I would say, reprogramming that happens during those few days. And I am a witness of that since I attended one of them. And today, I wanted to talk specifically about mindset, and specifically mindset around how women think. I know you've worked with people from different backgrounds and different genders. And in my experience, when I work with women, I see that there is a lot of acquired beliefs that we carry. And some of it has to do with our thinking about around age, our thinking about our inability to do some things, and our lack of self-confidence sometimes. I would like you to address more about that, and why do you think a lot of us carry that, and what can we do to actually rewire that belief system?
Wow, there's a lot there. Generally, the way I look at beliefs is that there are, let's call it beliefs, instincts, reactions, like, how we make decisions, all that sort of stuff. Is I feel like there are certain things that are kind of, let's call it like hardwired. Right. Like they're part of the operating system. No, they're part of the hardware. They're part of the computer. And then there's another level, and then there's things that are like, they're part of the operating system. And then there's, after that, there's learned things, like, like a program. And so what I think we have to look at sometimes is where our beliefs are being influenced by those three different levels. So if you take a look at somebody who's got like a balloon phobia, let's say you got this guy, he's got a balloon phobia. Why does he have a balloon phobia? Probably because when he was 2 or 3 years old, he was at a party and he was playing with a balloon. Somebody popped it. It scared the hell out of him, and the people around him reacted badly. And now he has a balloon phobia. There's no rational reason for a balloon phobia. There's no instinct for a balloon phobia. There's no hardwired balloon phobia. There's a purely learned response. On the other hand, you take somebody who has a snake phobia. Well, not everybody has one, so it's obviously not a purely hardwired thing, but there is a bit of an instinct about snakes and spiders and stuff like that because, they were dangerous for our ancestors, and they still can be today. So now you have a belief that's stacked upon an instinct. And so that one might be a little bit harder to deal with for somebody. And so when we talk about some of the beliefs you're thinking about, like when we're talking about gender differences and gender roles and self-esteem and all that kind of stuff, I think it's useful for us to look at the nature argument, like what are we born with? And then what do we build upon that? And if we can look at both of those things, I think we have a real chance at creating transformation. Right.
And what do you think they are? Well, what is it that we are born with, and what are the real differences?
Well, this is a little controversial, and but let's go there. Like,
right.
Look, today I want to be very clear. I want to start with the, first of all, politically correct, but also absolutely what I believe, and that is that there are differences between the primary genders. I understand there's a more flexible gender fluidity conversation to be had, but when we're talking about, people who identify as men and women who are male and female in the traditional sense, what I think we have to recognize, there are differences, but that they're equal.
Right.
And I think that's the whole thing. Like, I know this is a stupid metaphor, but you can have your Ferrari over here and your top level SUV over here, and they might cost the same amount of money. They're equal, but they do different things.
Absolutely.
And that's how I feel men and women can be in the larger stereotypical conversation. I'm not saying that any woman has to do women's things or a man has to do. I'm just saying at our core, we evolve with different purposes.
Yeah.
So for example, in a traditional environment, before you introduce things like hygiene and education and vaccines and things that stop childhood illness, in environments that don't have that, it's absolutely typical for a woman to have 8 to 10 children in her lifetime. Yeah. And then when you introduce methods to stop malaria, when you introduce education, when you introduce nutrition, when you introduce hygiene, then all of a sudden many of their children are surviving, and so then they have less children. But traditionally, it would absolutely normal for a woman to have 8 to 10 children. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well,
I have like 7 siblings, and I'm one of the 8 actually.
There you go. There you are. You're one of the 8. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But if you were one cultural generation back, it wouldn't even have been a choice. You would have had to.
True.
You would have had 8 because you weren't sure they were all going to make it. And you want to have some that are going to be there to take care of you in your old age. We live in a world now where you can save money and there's pensions. And so we don't need that precaution in the same way we did before.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, the way it was going on is people were having 8 and losing 5 or 6 of them, but then 2 of them were surviving to take care of them. Then all these things got introduced and hygiene and education, all the things I mentioned. And now suddenly people are having 8 and all 8 of them are surviving, or 7 or 8 of them are surviving. And then in the next generation, people are having 1 or 2 or none. Now, why I'm saying this is that if a woman traditionally was having, say, 8 children, then she's going to gestate for 9 months times 8. Now, for the first, say, 6 months, she still can be very functional and doing all kinds of, but in the last 3 months, she can't work the same way she was before. Then she's got to care for this little thing. She got to breastfeed it, care for it. That's like minimum 3 years of, of not, like, she can't be a hunter. She can't. So, and she's going to have 8 of those kids. So that means, 24 years are going to be, in a sense, invested in the children. It's not ideal that she's a hunter. So she didn't evolve. So women didn't evolve to be primary hunters. I'm not saying a woman can't hunt. I'm all for it. Go hunt if you want to hunt. But they didn't evolve that way.
Yeah, I love that example. Earlier you mentioned something about learned behavior, and now this is exactly what I wanted to address, because a lot of women come from obviously different backgrounds, different cultures, and there is a lot of social conditioning that happens. So growing up, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I grew up in an environment where I didn't have any female role models who were educated. And in fact, I was pretty much discouraged to get an education. And so when I got qualified and I became qualified as a solicitor in the UK and in New York, I was considered too educated. And because I was considered too educated, I always had to make sure that I dumbed down when I was around the men in my environment and in my society.
Never do that.
It took me many, many years. And I have to admit, it was only in my late 40s that I suddenly realized that there was such a huge contradiction in who I was as a human being in the corporate context and who I was at home. I didn't even understand, but it was just something that obviously screws you up mentally, because you just don't understand this contradiction. And I want to talk about something else later, which I'll just touch upon now. What you said about what you always talk about, the hindsight window, and this is what I wanted to talk about. So I never ever realized that there was this huge contradiction. The only time I've realized that I had this contradiction was at a time when I was 46 and lost 100% of my money, 100%. And so I had to rebuild myself all over again for the next 2 years. And during that time, that was when I started having to take stock of who I was as a human being. I had to start thinking about, am I supposed to continue playing dumb, or do I actually now take ownership of what has happened, and do I take responsibility so that I can reinvent the wheel and start all over again? And so earlier I mentioned about the hindsight window. So when something like that happens to you and you ask yourself, instead of why me, but you ask yourself, what am I learning from this, and what can I do that will one day I can look back and say, I'm proud of myself and I'm glad that this happened. Can you talk a little bit more about hindsight window? Because that really resonated with me when I listened to your talk recently.
You know, it's one of my favorite things because there's so much emotional freedom in that exercise, in that conversation. One of the ways that I tend to describe this is, parentheses. The correct grammatical use of parentheses are to wrap around a part of the sentence that adds value to the sentence, but doesn't destroy the sentence if you take it out. So you can put parentheses around that because it means the sentence can stand on its own without that thing. And so people tend to use parentheses incorrectly in their life. Something happens to them. For example, like you get to, what was it, 46 or 48? I think, I can't remember. You lost everything, 46?
Yeah.
46-year-old, you lose everything. What'll happen for a lot of people is they will put parentheses around that event and look at that event as a standalone event, right? But the fact is that you can't do that, because if you take that out, the entire sentence would be disrupted, because there are things that you learned, there are experiences you gained, there are people you met, there's a richness of life that took place because that event happened to you. And so it's not a parenthetical event. In musical terms, it might be a sharp or a flat note, but it's a sharp or a flat note placed in perfection of an otherwise amazing symphony of your life. So the hindsight window says we don't use parentheses that way. We take a look at an event and we expand the parenthetical experience to encompass our entire life. We say, this thing happened to me. I wonder how it's going to affect me in 5 years or 10 years in the best possible way. And so, you know, I also have been in a situation where at about 40-ish, I also lost just about everything. And it was, and worse than that, it was like through a combination of stupidity and being defrauded. It was just the shameful and embarrassing and awful. And if I put a parentheses around that moment, then it's a bad event in my life. Right. And if I put a parentheses around that moment, then the people in that moment were bad people. But I get that if that hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have moved to Marin County. I wouldn't have lived in California for 3 years. I wouldn't have got to work on Pirates of the Caribbean and Avatar. I also wouldn't have, because John Gray from Mars Venus Books is a very good friend of mine. I ended up going for walks. I ended up becoming great friends with him because I lived in Marin County. I met Chet Holmes, who introduced me to Tony Robbins, Alex Mendoza. Like, all these incredible people in my life would not be in my life if I tried to remove that parenthetical experience. So it can't be a bad event. And then this is where it gets a bit crazy. But what if you thought about it like this? What if at the beginning of the whole life process, you were on the, I don't know, silly example, but you're on like the bus that's bringing you to life. And you're on the bus with a bunch of other people that are on their way. And somebody starts an exercise. Meena, what spiritual development would you like on this tour when you go to the life this time? What do you want to learn?
I like that.
Oh, I'd like to learn about trust and openness. And I'd like to learn about abundance. And everybody's going, all right, she needs to experience lack, heartbreak, and rip off. She needs to lose everything to learn the stuff she wants to learn. So the tour guide goes, all right, Meena, are you ready for all that? And you're like, of course, that's what I'm here to learn. And so the bus driver goes, okay, who on this tour is ready to rip her off? Take everything from her. And don't do it when she's 25. Wait till she's 46. Wait till it's late. Like, really nail her with it. Who's up? And somebody goes, I'll do it. I'll rip her off. And then you walk over and go, high five, lay it to me good. And then boom, life begins and you forget that deal. You forget that deal. But now when somebody does stuff like that to me, I just go, hey, awesome. You're really winding me up. You've got me. You're teaching me something.
Wow, that really spoke to me. And so that happened in 2016 and now it's 2020. And you're right, it changed me as a person. And not just that, it actually changed my calling. So now what I do is I mentor women and women-led businesses. And not just to get them to understand how powerful we are as human beings, but I specifically focus on women who are above 40, because what I am tired of hearing again and again from women who are above 40, and a lot of these women are married, have kids, and already feel like they are done with life, and maybe they have lived a life where they feel like they've always been a mother to somebody, a wife to somebody, and you kind of fade away in the background, and you think like you don't even have a sense of independent life. And so a lot of these women I speak to tend to rule themselves out before anyone else rules them out. And so what I really love about what you said about the hindsight window is that when something like this happens to us, it is really up to us whether we want, it's our decision as to whether or not that particular event is going to be the final chapter, or this is the chapter where the twist happens and then you make the book have a happy ending. So it really is dependent on us as to how we think and how we want to change our own story.
Meena, you know, it's so funny. I'm really glad that you're doing that work, because I also have been watching this happen. You know, people reach these different thresholds in life, and, you know, they kind of get to a point where, but here's something that just hit me really recently, like really got me. When I turned 20, first thing is, when I turned 21, my mom called me on my 21st birthday. And you may have, I tell this story sometimes, but the second part's kind of a new thing. But my mom called me on my 21st birthday and she said, happy birthday and all that stuff. And then she goes, man, you are such a bright kid. I'm so proud of you. You've just gone through all kinds of incredible things. And she goes, but I do want to tell you something. She goes, when you get to 30, you're going to realize how little you know right now, because you're going to be even smarter at 30. And I thought, what a condescending thing to say. This woman just doesn't understand, right? That's how I'm thinking, right? Well, you know, 9 years later, I'm 30 and I call my mom and I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. Who was that kid? You know that kid was allowed to sign contracts on my behalf? Like, who was that child, that 21-year-old? Like, wow. At 30, oh my God. And this is my mom's reaction. Wait till you get to 40.
Wow.
And I've noticed that I just turned 50. I'm like, I love being 50. Here's what's crazy. And this is a great message, I think, in relative to what you're, see, when I turned 20, I was a little bit afraid of my 30s. I was like, oh man, that's old. And then when I turned 30, I was like, oh, I'm getting closer to 40. I'm really afraid of 40. And when I got to 40, I was like, oh my God, not 50. Oh my God. But you know what's really crazy? You know what I loved? I loved my 30s way more than my 20s. And you know what I liked even more than my 30s? My 40s. I mean, I love my 40s. And I got to tell you, I am loving 50. And so one of the things that I think we have to realize is that we keep on using fear to hold us back from living our fear of some perception of the future that is then damaging our quality of the present. Not worth it.
Yeah. Honestly, Eric, that really breaks my heart. It breaks my heart when I see this again and again and again. Yeah. I recently finished a group coaching program that I did amongst 10 women. And I want to share with you a story which really touched me and reminded me of the importance of what I do. I have to be honest, there are times when I really miss the corporate life, and there are times I really want to go back because it's habit, right? It's been like that. I've been a corporate executive for over 2 decades. But when something like this happens, it makes me believe that there is a reason why I went through what I went through. So one of the women in the coaching program, she is a 50-year-old divorcee, and you know, she's an Indian and living in India, doesn't have kids. And as you probably already know, when you are a divorcee, you are 50 and you don't have kids and you are single, it's like not just triple, quadruple whammy. And so throughout her whole life, even though she's a lawyer, throughout her whole life, she felt as if she was not, she didn't count. She didn't count at all. And even though she's a lawyer, she didn't have the confidence to actually speak in public. She didn't do any of that. So after I finished the program, she actually texted me when she turned 50 and said, thank you so much for what you do and the work that you do, because now for the first time, I feel happy. And I'm happy that I'm 50. And so that really touched me and made me realize that there are so many women out there who need to hear this, and so many women who need to find a way to reprogram themselves. Because the unfortunate thing is this, I'd love to know your view on this in terms of feminism. I personally have a very different view about feminism. A lot of times when I give talks in schools, I am asked by kids about, are you a feminist? And my question usually is, what is feminism to you? And so in my opinion, I don't like to be talking about, like you said, you could be two different cars, but same value, but completely different functions. And this is what I think as well. I keep saying that you can't compare an apple and a pear. They are just different. What we need to be focusing on is how we can both join hands and we can co-elevate instead of we compete with each other. I don't believe in equality simply because we are different. And I believe the power of my work is so important simply because I want women to understand how powerful they are. It's not about asking men or the world or society to empower us. It's about us taking ownership of the way we think and changing the way we think. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. It's funny. My mom was always a feminist when I was growing up, and so I thought a lot about what that really meant. And I feel like let's go back to something you said that you don't believe in equality. So let's just talk for a minute, because let's say we write down men on one side of the paper and we put women on the other side of the paper. So then we write down a few things, like we write down rights, value to society, but then we write down strength in speed, emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, etc., childbearing capacity. We write those things down, and here's what we're going to find out. There are many areas where men and women are not equal. Statistically, we're not equal. Absolutely. I cannot have a baby. We are not equal. Absolutely. I cannot breastfeed. We're not equal. I am statistically stronger than you. Now, that may not be the case, but statistically, men are physically stronger. We're not equal. But when we get to the category of rights and value to society, we are equal.
Love that, yeah.
And there shouldn't be any debate about that. It's funny, like when we can get into the gender pay gap dispute, I find that to be fascinating. I believe that there should be equal pay for equal work. There should be equal pay for equal work, but that's not what we do many times. I saw this article in the newspaper, and the press, let's be clear, they're not here to inform us, they're here to manipulate and frighten us. And I saw this headline that said, Uber pays male drivers more. And I was like, oh, I'm not using Uber ever again, bastards. What are they doing? But then I actually decided, I know a lot of people don't do this these days, but I decided to read the actual article, not just the headline. It's a new idea. It's a new way of looking at things. But I read the article, and as I went through the article, here's the truth. The truth is that men often choose to drive during surge pricing. They drive in dangerous neighborhoods. Men are taking on routes, and as a consequence of that decision, they're earning more money per hour, but they're being paid equally. And so what I think is that we get into this whole conversation. Well, a traditional feminist would read that headline and start picketing outside Absolutely. Uber and go, no more Uber, no more Uber. But they're not asking the bigger question. They're not talking about the fact that men die on the job 4 times more often than women do. Maybe they're doing some jobs, that are really dangerous, and maybe there's a danger pay component to that. So I don't want to get into all those. I want to agree what we can agree. A man and a woman doing the same job and producing the same result should earn the same money. I think we can all agree with that. I don't think there's an issue here. So our rights should be equal, but if we start to pretend that we are the same, we're losing out on the richness of the fullest human experience. And I'll tell you, I was on an interview yesterday and this topic kind of came up as well. And I pointed something out. I used to run a studio in Northern California that used to be part of Lucasfilm. And you know what I found out about Lucasfilm? The place is run by women. I mean, George Lucas is the guy. Well, they've sold it now to Disney, but even my primary contact at Disney was a woman. Like, there were very smart, powerful, emotionally intelligent women running those organizations. And by the way, I woke up to this reality about a year ago. My company, the president of my company is a woman. All the top senior people in the company are women. Almost all the creative people are women. In fact, I am one of 3 men in the whole company.
Wow.
I'm not saying we hired preferentially for that. What I'm saying is that in certain roles, I wanted to take advantage of one thing. And here's one thing that I've noticed. If I have to choose between 2 people that are going to be in charge of the heart and soul of my company, they're going to be in charge of the way people are taken care of, I think I'm going to want somebody with some feminine energy in them to do that. That could be a man or a woman, and it's more likely to be a woman. And this could be, you know, somebody could say, well, that's very sexist or what have you. I'm like, no, I'm just trying to get the fullest, most rich experience I can for everybody that works for me.
Fantastic. I want to give you a context. I mean, a lot of the things you said is so prevalent and that is happening everywhere around the world. However, I want to be talking more in terms of women that come from a little bit more traditional background, like myself. And I think maybe we could agree it's more the South Asian background and perhaps, you know, Latin America and other parts of the world. But what I'm aware of is mainly the South Asian background. The hardwiring that happens very early on. And so we grow up learning and believing, and we don't even understand it's a belief. We think it's a fact. We grow up with the fact that we are created for a different reason. And like you said, you know, about childbearing, having kids, we are created for a different reason. And our reason is more to be domestic. And so what I find that happens a lot is when a woman tries to think a little differently or speak up, she's many times shut down simply because she's speaking up to a guy, you know. Now, a lot of these women are my clients and I deal with them a lot. And what I want to ask you is this: how do you actually get them to understand that this is just a program? It's programming. And there is a mindset that has been cultivated so deep in them, and it's so deep rooted that they can't seem to get out of that mindset. And that's one aspect of it, is the mindset. And I tell you what the worst part is. The worst part is they believe that even if they get out of this mindset, the environment that they live in does not support that mindset. So how would you advise someone like that?
I think that the first thing is that it's important to remember that it's not simply a mindset, it's a cultural reality. In other words, it's a mindset that's now amplified by cultural reality. Now, here's what happens. You take a lot of, say, South Asian women and you send them to New York for 2 years to go to university. They don't accept that shit anymore. They go home and they're like, don't talk to me like that. No, I'm not. Even if you send them to London, they gain a degree of perspective where they now see that the world isn't like that. And so they see a different culture, and that can change something inside them. Now, the trouble is that it's very easy to facilitate transformation for somebody if you change the entire environment around them. Because you now go off to go and study law, and you go to a British, where did you go to law school?
The UK.
Yeah, so you went in Britain, you're dealing with a very different culture. You're dealing with a culture that still has, you know, certain misogynistic tendencies, but generally speaking, there's a cultural reality of women being able to reach their fuller potential compared, say, with South Asia. And so you go there, and because the entire environment's been changed, you're able to go, oh, my conditioning is wrong, right? But now you take that woman who's still there in South Asia, and she's going, look, my environment matches my conditioning. It's really, that's tough. So, and here's one of the problems. Let's say you manage to break the conditioning. Now she knows not to stand for that stuff anymore. Yeah, but you know the trouble is, if you're Rosa Parks and you're the first one to say, I'm not going to move to the back of the bus, and you're the first one to stand up, you're the first one that gets arrested, you're the first one that gets shot, you're the first one that loses their job, you're the first one that gets a bad reputation in the marketplace, because you're now attempting to move the culture. And the question is, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to stand on principle at the cost of your own quality of life in order to make a world a better place for the women that follows? And until women are, it won't change.
Yeah.
So and by the way, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'll talk about what I think men should do in a minute, because that's a massive issue as well. But you asked me specifically what they can do. Well, I think one of the things they could do, honestly, like any one of your clients, I totally suggest them, you figure out a way to get them to go take a course somewhere in Los Angeles or New York or London, so that they can see that it's not like that. They can see it. And the other thing is, and this is crazy, but there are some shows out there that are worth watching that can actually educate people. I hate to say it, but like, I'll tell you what, I transformed the culture of my business by getting my employees to watch West Wing. Why? Because West Wing showed unbelievably powerful people, men and women, busy, communicating effectively. And I made my assistants watch it, and a couple of the top managers, and it changed the whole tone of our company. So wow. You know what? What if you find some really powerful role models for them and say, look, watch this, look at this. This is what it's like in the rest of the world. Slowly start to let them see that. Get them to travel, get them to go do a 6-week course somewhere where they can go and be around women who will let them know it's not like that. Then when they go back, they won't be willing to stand for it anymore. Yeah. And then there comes into the question of how disruptive are they willing to be, and what's the cost to them of that? Yeah. And now let's talk about men. Man, I am embarrassed very often to be a man when I see what happens out there in the world. I am. I'm just embarrassed. I got into this big debate online last week because I won't get into the actual words that were being used, but in English, there are some insults that we offer that are very gender specific, and I hate them. And I don't hate them for some misguided sense of political correctness. I don't care. Use whatever word you want. I don't go to my kids, don't swear. I don't care. Look, I'll tell them, if you swear in this kind of a place, people won't like it. But, I'm not into the political correctness thing. But what I am really aware of is that when you use one of those words to insult somebody, I'm not worried you insulted them. I'm worried about all the women you insulted by using women as an insult. So I won't use the words we talked about in the debate. I'll use something a little bit more watered down. When one man says to his little boy, oh, don't cry like a little girl. When he says to his boy, oh, you throw like a girl, you're not demeaning the little boy, you're demeaning the girls. And that's where we have to begin to change, even at that level, where men have to stop treating women like that. We have to stop running advertising campaigns where our women are forced to walk through malls and airports with posters of genetically unlikely women that have been photographed by professional magicians with makeup artists, who then get altered further by some digital genius to create a woman that doesn't even exist. And now our daughters and our mothers and our sisters and our wives are walking through that place looking and going, I'll never be that perfect. Like, we have to make a cultural change across the board. So on one level, yes, I believe the work you're doing is so valuable, because it does have to start there, but it also has to start at a cultural level where we accept that these seemingly innocuous little things that we do, like a girl or what have you, are socially damaging.
I totally agree. Wow, that was really powerful. I think the message that I really love just now was the message that you had for men, because many times it's so habitual for them to be using phrases like that without actually even thinking what that actually means. I want to share with you a story about something similar that happened to me. And that's, as I said to you, it was only at a later age in life that I started understanding how important it was for me to speak up. I was at a social event where one of the men was drunk, and he was starting to ask me a lot of questions about my dad and my dad's will. And because there were a lot of people on the table, and also being a lawyer, for me, it's very clear that you don't discuss confidential matters. So I decided I was not going to speak. I just said, we'll talk about this some other time. And because we were surrounded by so many people, and he said, but why another time? Why not now? And I said, because you're drunk. And he just got up and slammed the table and started screaming at me and saying, how dare you call me a drunk? And that was when I had like a moment, and I stood up and said, you know what? Grow the hell up. And I walked away and told my mom a couple of things. And her response, to be honest, was what was the game changer for me. I told her a couple of things. The first thing is, I told her, this is what happened. You're going to get a phone call, and my uncles and everyone will complain that I was disrespectful. they'll never tell you that what he did was disrespectful, because that's just accepted. I was disrespectful because I spoke up. The second thing I said to her is, what breaks my heart is that the women will tell you I was disrespectful because they are conditioned not to respond. And I absolutely loved what my mom said. She said, I did not educate you to be a doormat. You had the right to speak up. And that for me was what changed my internal setting, because I was always not overtly told, but because of the programming, always believed that I needed to behave in a certain way. I want to also ask you about fear, because I love how you explain fear and what it is that people can do to change their perception of fear. Because earlier you talked about, the issue here is not just the way a woman thinks, but also because her environment and her culture is such that she can't just transform and expect the environment to transform as well. But one of the greatest stumbling blocks, or I would say limiting belief, that prevents a woman to want to even understand that there is a better world out there, is this fear that keeps them stuck in the same place.
I think that we have to figure out that there's a difference between fear and danger. Danger is a reality and fear is a perception. Take a look at the guy at the table. When you said that to him, he responded in fear. You weren't actually a danger to him, but he still responded in fear. And so when we understand the difference, that fear is the response and danger is the condition, we don't have to respond to every single danger with fear, and we often respond to fear we respond to things that aren't even dangerous with fear. And funny, if I was at the table with that guy and he slammed his hands down on the table like that, I just would have said, you see, do you think you would have reacted like this if you weren't drunk? I love when people prove the very thing you said, but that's what he was afraid of. He was afraid. You were not a danger to him. So what I want to make the differentiation here is that fear is a response designed to help you to survive, right? That fear is a response designed to help you survive. So something dangerous comes along, and the first reaction doesn't need to be fear. The first reaction needs to be, reasoned thought and logical thinking and analysis. How dangerous is this? Who is this dangerous to? What possible strategies could I employ to take this out? For example, this lockdown, let's just talk about the economy of it. Forget the virus for a minute. Just talk about the economy of it. It is creating danger, right? Danger. And for some people, it created immediate danger. And for other people, it creates looming danger. The further away the danger is, the more rational you can be about your approach to dealing with it. So what happened in my case, I'll tell you, I did it badly and then really well. I was early in recognizing how serious the pandemic was going to be. I was the one who called my team and my company and said, no, we have to change everything as of right now. And they're like, no. I was early on. So the good side of it was I recognized the danger early. That's a good thing. But then I started responding with fear. I started responding with fear and wanting, I got into a bit of a panic mode for a few days. What about this? What about that? We have all these employees. Blah, 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 blah. And then I stopped and I started dealing with it rationally, because the truth was, I looked at it and go, yeah, it's dangerous, but danger always has a seed of opportunity in it. And the danger is not immediate to us. We have a business, we have cash, we have cash flow, we have memberships, we have things that work. So it's dangerous, but not this minute. And so that means I don't have to respond with fear, because what does fear mean? Adrenaline, cortisol, and unconscious action. Fear is designed to protect you when you didn't plan well enough and the lion got too close. Now you need fear, because fear will put you into overdrive autopilot, help you get up the tree, help you fight the lion, help you run away, whatever. But when the lion was 6 miles away, you didn't need fear, you needed awareness and logical thought. And so one of the things that I would do in the case you're describing is try to, there's a great exercise you can do with a piece of paper where you write down on the one side of the page, what is the danger? And then what is the fear? And you'll find that the fear is almost always future pacing out to the potential danger. It's not now, it's not this minute. But remember, our ancestors didn't really have a lot of future danger, right? Like almost everything that they dealt with was now. There's a saber-toothed tiger over here, or there's another tribe, or there's a storm, or there's a drought, and I'm starving right now. So they were wired for immediate problems. And many of the things that we are afraid of aren't immediate at all. They're like weeks or months or even years away. And so do we really need to be responding with fear?
That's a good one. Thank you for that. I think a lot of times fear keeps us stuck only because we create a story around it in our mind about the worst case scenario. And a lot of times the worst case scenario doesn't even happen. You
are so exactly right. And you can explain it like this. There's danger. In order to experience fear, you have to make up a story about the danger.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah,
because, let's say that, we know that there's another tribe coming to attack us. All right. Well, in order for us to experience fear, we have to make up a story about what that attack might look like. Might we get killed? Might we get injured? We have to imagine how the danger is going to play out. So we have to create a story. But, people do this all the time with public speaking. I have to go on stage. I'm afraid. Why are you afraid? Because of the public speaking. No, you're not. You're not afraid because of the public speaking. You're afraid because of the story in your head about what might happen when you walk up on the stage. You're going to forget what you wanted to say, that people won't laugh at your jokes, that you're going to bomb. You're afraid of that story you're telling yourself. And what if you told a slightly different story? What if you told a story about how you went on stage, you cracked a joke right away, people liked it, they laughed, they liked to talk, they gave you a standing ovation. If you told that story, maybe there wouldn't be fear.
That's true. I want to tell you a fascinating story. You mentioned earlier about fear of snakes. So I grew up as a kid. I don't know why. I never had any bad experiences with snakes, but I had this huge phobia about snakes. I used to be so scared of snakes that if I saw a snake in a movie or in a picture as a kid, I would not be able to sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night and look for the snake underneath my blanket. That was how fearful I was about snake. It's only in my late 40s, I think I really had a spiritual awakening after I lost that money and I had all sorts of things happen to me. I had a massive shift in the way I thought, and I suddenly became much more aligned as a person, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. I became much more aligned. I didn't have all these stories in my head. Of course, sometimes you do about small things, but most of the time I can catch that story only because my sense of awareness just heightened so much. So I was in Ubud one day and I was on the phone while I was walking, and a group of tourists started screaming at me and I didn't understand what they were saying. And I was just like, I was actually getting a little frustrated. Why are they shouting at me while I'm on the phone? Can't they see I'm on the phone? But after a while, I just put the phone away and I was like, what? They're like, are you joking? Did you not see that? I said, did I not see what? They said, a huge cobra just crossed past you. And typically I would have had goosebumps. But in this case, I was like, oh, where is it? Where is it? And then I didn't know whether I was more shocked about the fact that the cobra actually went past me and didn't notice, or the fact that I did not have goosebumps when I even knew it was a cobra. So I thought that was quite a fascinating thing that happened.
It really shows we are, when we can bring conscious thought to a situation, when we can be really conscious of what's going on, we get to choose our behavior a lot more. If you think about the things that people regret in their life, it's almost always things that they did on autopilot. If you're really, really angry, you're on autopilot. You're saying things you don't mean. If you're really, really afraid, you're on autopilot. You're doing things you didn't really want to do necessarily. Speaking of snakes, it was kind of funny. I was in a game reserve in South Africa, and I'm driving along, and I'm there with my parents, but they're not with me. They're in another car, and I'm driving along. I've got my girlfriend in the car.
How old were you? How old were you?
Maybe 27 or something like that.
Right.
And we're driving along, and we're looking at these animals, and all of a sudden, a puff adder comes across the road, and it goes under the car, and then we can hear it go up into the wheels.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh no, because if we drive, we're gonna kill it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to kill it, and I don't know what to do, and you're not allowed to get out of your car in these places because there's lions and puff adders and stuff, right? So I'm like, I don't really know what to do. I don't want to kill it. And why they're doing this, by the way, is that they're cold-blooded, so they feel the warmth of the engine. and they like to go up into that area and feel the
That's
warmth of it.
interesting.
So anyway, I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And I get out of the car, which you're not allowed to do. And I walk into the bush. Again, there are wild animals. I grab a big stick and I come under the car and I'm digging around under the car trying to get this snake out. And I get the snake coil around the stick and I'm lifting it out. And then all of a sudden I hear the most terrible sound, a car coming. And I'm telling you, if it's a game ranger, I'm going to get kicked out of the park and banned for life. Like, I'm interfering with wildlife. I'm out of my car. I'm breaking all the rules. And I've got this snake on the stick. And I'm like, oh no, oh no. And then the car comes around the corner. It wasn't a game ranger. It was my parents.
Wow.
It was even worse. It was even worse. But, you know, and they're freaking out because I got this puff adder on the stick and I take the puff adder and I put it over there. And then that night at camp, they're annoyed with me. And then I stopped and I said, hold on a second, guys. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The ground was incredibly cold. The snake's blood is cold. Snakes can't move quickly when they're cold. They're very, very slow when they're cold. That's why mostly people get bit, because they step on them, because the snake couldn't leave, because it's cold-blooded. Plus, the puff adder is a back-fanged snake, which means its fangs are way far back. So in order to bite you, it has to really get wide open on a small piece of your body. It's hard for it to bite your leg. And so here's why I'm saying all this. I wasn't afraid. I was able to think logically about what I was doing. And by the time I finished explaining it, I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I think if we can be more like that in our lives, where we don't respond in fear to every dangerous thing, instead, like, look, Meena, this is the crazy example I use all the time. When you're playing a video game, you're looking forward to the hardest parts. That's the best part of the game. Best part of the game, the big boss. And I defeated the big boss. And by the way, if you defeated the big boss on your first attempt, it wouldn't be nearly so delicious. If it takes you 8 or 9 or 10, the more tries it takes, the more delicious the victory.
Yeah.
What if we live that way?
Yeah. Yeah. I always talk about life being a video game. It's like when you're at level 1, you master it, you learn from your mistake, you get defeated, and then when you get really good at it, you go to level 2, and then when you get level 2, it becomes even harder. And so it's the same thing with life. If you don't learn from the lessons, you will keep making the same mistake again and again and again until you learn that lesson, and then you graduate to another mistake. So that's just how life is. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate your time. I can't tell you how much this means to me. And I really hope that everyone who's watching this is going to get so much out of it, not just about the way we are conditioned as women, but also as human beings, and the consciousness about what you said about us just shifting our perspective, getting out of our story and becoming more rational. So thank you so much for these lessons. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a great conversation, and keep up the good work.
If you like this video, be sure to check out the other 2 videos. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, what are you waiting for? Press the subscribe button and also the notification button so you can be notified when I post new videos. I post new videos every Friday. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.